Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10 o'clock p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta. Wednesday night. Getting ahead of myself here. Wednesday night, April the 20th. I'm glad to be here. This is a show that I wanted to do a second reading from my book, Veta Juvies, and I'm just doing this in honor of all teens out there who are experiencing trouble in their lives and maybe being abused or have been abused or just having so much trouble and no support, and also. And for all teens, I mean, I was a teenager once, you know what I mean, and I know how hard it was for me, so I try to put myself in their shoes and remember how hard it is for them. And I also for the April National Child Abuse Awareness Month down in the United States, and really, I mean, everywhere where people are getting information, everybody's trying to do something this month, really, to raise awareness and education and promote awareness surrounding the issues of child abuse. And just what a serious issue it really is. And the month of April, people are doing lots of things, organizations and not-for-profits and Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we're busy doing all kinds of stuff for this month, but we do 365 days a year, so it doesn't really make a difference. But I wanted to, we're just always busy trying to stop child abuse. That's what we do. But I just wanted to kind of contribute, and I thought, well, I'll do a reading from my books, and I think, for people just so they can sort of see what my books are about. And I do a whole lot of talking. If people who tune into my show from one child abuse survivor to another in the morning, that's my healing journey. And I do a whole lot of talking about, really my books are my life. And so the two books that I put out, A Life of Death Redemption, and that one went out, that was out early last year in the springtime, so about a year ago. And this book, Veta Juvies, put out, it was published in October. And so I just wanted to do a reading from it, and it's a little bit hard to read this because it's a bit emotional for me. I don't mind talking about my healing journey on my morning show because it's more of a third-party look at, and looking at survivor issues and whatnot. It's not so much just my pain right there on the page in front of everybody, but I went public for a reason, and I went public not to have revenge or anything like that, towards my parents or any kind of revengeful thing or trying to get even or anything like that. It was mainly to be a voice out here to show the public and the world, this is what happens to children who have been abused, and this is what children are going through right now. It's so important that people, get involved where you can, do whatever you can in your own capacity and your own capabilities, in your own neighborhoods, your own communities, and your own homes to make sure that children are not being abused, and get involved with groups who are doing some good work, whether it's locally, nationally. I'm involved more nationally and internationally than I am locally because I just don't have time, because I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, so I'm a volunteer with them, and that's a national organization, right? It's a not-for-profit based out of Michigan, but we have volunteers and people who work to support us and promote the work that we're doing all over the place. So it's very much national. So I'm not really locally hooked up, but I plan to be. And it's a matter of time, and I really don't have a lot of time, so I just do what I can with what time I have. But these books were published, and it was a real honor, really, to have my books be able to be out there. Like I was saying on the last show, that my story is really not special. It's not. The only reason I'm doing this is to promote awareness and education. It's not like I believe that my story is more special than somebody else. It's just one more story. There's a lot of survivor stories out there, and they're all worth reading as far as I'm concerned. I have a lot. I do read a lot of people's stories, and I do try to get the books when I can afford them, and so I know how it goes, right? And everybody's story is important, and not just abused people. I like to read other people's stories too, biographies, and I like to see what makes people tick, and I think I learn a lot from it. And it's just interesting to see what people have gone through and what they've survived, because that's what life is all about. It's surviving, and for everybody really, we all have to survive something. And whether it's child abuse, some sort of illness that might come on a person, right, and have to survive that, and have to learn how to get through it, and how to handle it. And there's just every issue you can think of, that people go through in their lives that make us all survivors. And so, but I just wanted to draw attention to what happens to children when they grow up in an abusive home, and really taking a look at my story, allowing people the opportunity to look into a family who didn't get any help. The opportunity was there many times for my parents to get help, and they didn't make the right choice. There was many times my brothers, my two siblings who killed themselves, they were offered help so many times and turned it down and didn't follow through with it and allow themselves to heal, move forward. It's sad to see that this sort of type of thing happens to people's families all the time. And because I grew up in this mess, I knew a lot of people as well who were living in these dysfunctional homes and teenagers. And this particular story, Veta Juvies, is based on one summer with my friends. And it was a summer right before, it's kind of that period of time where we were still kind of more like young teens instead of older teens. So our minds, like the way we perceive things and the way we held ourselves and the way that we acted and behaved was really quite childish and quite immature. And we were not at that stage of an older teen yet. We were just like 15, 16 years old, and some of us quite immature, including myself. And so I wanted people to see what happens to children who have grown up in these dysfunctional homes and with no real parental support and can get themselves into a whole lot of trouble, which sadly enough my book is true. I did change the names of the people in it, and most of my friends were severely affected by the lack of parental support and the abuse that was going on within their homes, and the dysfunction, the neglect, took a toll on their lives. And some of my friends are not here today because of it. And the direct result of just not thriving as a child, not thriving as a teenager, and getting into a lot of trouble. And this is my story. And I managed to get out. And this is the thing. I mean, I managed to make a clear, good decision for myself at the age of 21 to straighten my life up and to get myself a better life. I didn't begin my healing journey until I was 40, so 20 years later. But I was at least working and somewhat functioning as a productive member of society and trying to just work and pay the bills and do the normal thing that adults do, in the meantime, carrying around a huge burden from being abused as a child. So, I began a healing journey 4 years ago, and it's been a long road to get to that point to allow myself to heal. And so I just remember what it was like for me as a teen, and I knew, my friends were suffering too. And in their own ways, we all, none of our stories were the same, but we all had sort of similar, I guess the similarity between us would have been the lack of parental support. There were none of our parents were encouraging us to do anything with our lives, and here we were 15, 16 years old, and our parents were not encouraging extracurricular school activities like sports or bands or, band music, things like this, where, parents who put their kids into sports or parents who, provide these outlets for their children, to get them involved in something so that they can learn to be part of a team and they can learn some self-esteem and learn some, to build some confidence, and also to keep them off the streets so that they're not getting in trouble doing drugs or doing petty crimes or things like this. And so none of us had any support from our parents, so we were always out running around basically looking for trouble because we grew up in these homes that were completely violent and dysfunctional and, if not just neglectful, some of my friends. Where the parents were just not available emotionally. They were not available physically. They were not available in any way, and many of us were being abused by our parents. And so, the only interaction between us and our parents was a negative response, right? And it's not like we were being treated great until we were 14 years old, and then all of a sudden the abuse started. Like, we grew up in this mess, and then we're just left on our own to try to figure out how to behave and how to, how to do the right things by ourselves, and none of us knew how to do that. And so this is my story, and I wanted people to know, that this is what teens are going through. Teens who are in trouble, and teens who are, not making the right decisions for themselves, right? And a lot of times, you look back at their family situation, and you will see that there is no support for those teens, for that teen, and sometimes they're just thrown out of their homes. Sometimes they're just abused and they just run away or whatever, and sometimes teens get into trouble and they come from perfectly good homes. So we know this, right? It's just a hard time in a person's life to be a teenager, and without parental support, it just widens that valley for trouble to, more trouble to come in. You know what I mean? I think when parents are supportive of their children all the way through from 0 to whatever age, children do so much better. There will be some that will still fall through the cracks and slip through, but the majority will do so much better than being promoted to destroy your life. You know what I mean? Absolutely horrific. But last week we were looking at, or this week Monday night we were looking at the first 9 chapters, and I was just kind of, starting out the summer. Right, the very, the first week of summer. I was just happy it was summer, and it was going to be a cool summer with my friends. I was looking forward to that summer. But in the meantime, I had been being abused since I was born, and so I had to deal with all the stuff that was going on in my home, and as well, had not been encouraged to do anything with myself. And I was really the oldest out of the group that we were hanging around with. So, I was the oldest by a couple of years. Some of my friends were 2 years younger than me, some 3 years younger than me. And these were kids I grew up with on the street, on the same street. So I spent my whole life on the street with these kids and knew these kids and knew their parents, and, we knew each other quite well. And I was the oldest, so I was always kind of, they sort of looked to me for support, they looked to me for, to be the sane one in the group, right, because I was older. And so, I would try to keep things cool and mellow with all of us, and try to keep, my friends from getting into too much trouble. But, they made choices and they would do things, and I'd just be like, you don't want to get into trouble. I tried to be a voice, some sort of voice of encouragement for them. But, I was having troubles of my own, right? So there was only so much I could do to be there for them. But, we all tried to be there for each other. And what happened was they actually ended up probably doing a whole lot for me than they realized, just because they were my friends. And at a time when I really needed somebody in my life, I had some friends. One of my friends was killed by a drunk driver, my best friend. And when I was 15, she was 16 years old, and she was hit by a drunk driver and killed. So that was my best friend, and she lived on the street too. And then a few months later, I was hanging around with these younger kids because all my older friends who were around me when I was 13, 14 years old were gone. And so I had to kind of, I didn't have to, but I just started sort of hanging around with these younger kids that were on the street by a couple of years. And before, obviously I knew them and used to do stuff with them, but not much because I was always busy with my other friends. And so this was one summer where we just all started hanging out together, and it just went from bad to worse. And it was, it was just teenager stuff. It wasn't too serious, but we were involved in doing drugs and really, pretty harmful drugs, and looking to be high all the time. And all of us were experimenting with different types of drugs and not really taking care of ourselves, and didn't have parents that were concerned about us taking care of ourselves. So we're basically on our own, except for the abuse. So that's where I'm sort of trying to make a point of that in this book, is that the only interaction I had with my parents was abusive. It wasn't really positive. So anytime I would go home, I was facing abuse myself, or having to watch my parents fight, or listen to their arguing and cursing each other, and it was a very negative experience. So I'd go out on the street and hang out with my friends, and of course the first thing I'd want to do was escape from all that. So we'd be looking to get high, and my friends, many of them were being abused as well. So we would rely on each other for that support, and in doing so, we became really more like a family than our own families did. And so I wrote the foreword. I'll read it again. Innocence lost. Can we truly lose something we never had? Can an abused child lose their innocence? My answer to this question would be no. How can a child lose something they never had? How can a teenager, for that matter, lose their innocence when they never had a chance to be an innocent child? The inspiration for this book lies in my heart, my memories of my friends and how much we all wanted so badly to be innocent, and the hard fact was that we all knew it was impossible to be something we were not. Most of my friends growing up had been brought up in the same types of homes as mine, abusive and dysfunctional in every way. We were often out on the streets running around in the neighborhood like a gang, and even had our own official name, the Veta Juvies. I am absolutely positive that if any of the old Veta Juvies see this book, they will know it is about us. I have changed the names of my friends and myself, and this story is our story. And like my life now, I hope that their lives have been filled with peace and goodness. I wish them all the best and thank them for being my friends at a time when I needed them so badly. Without them, I don't know if I would still be here today, as they showed me unconditional love and care, protection and kindness, and were there for me when my own family was not. And they provided the love that my own family could not show. The Veta Juvies were my family and still are to this day. Love and peace to them and to all who read this book. And chapter 1, which starts out me and my friend hanging out on the street and in the middle of the night when we should have been at home. 16 years old. I was just 16, just barely turned 16, and my friend was 14. And here we are, 2 o'clock in the morning in a dangerous city where I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It is a gang-filled city full of crime, full of drugs, full of guns, full of drive-by shootings. It's a lot like Phoenix. It's a lot like East LA. It's a lot like, it's not as bad, but it's comparable, and it is a problem. That's a city that you don't want to be a teen on the street in that city, because you will encounter problems, because the people that are out on the streets in that city are out there normally for one reason, and that is to be up to some sort of illegal activity or something to do with drug abuse, or drug dealing or whatever, or are out there to hurt people. It's not a good city to be a child in. It's not a good city to be a youth in. And there's a lot of crime, and there's a lot of poverty. There's a real distinction between the people that have money and the people that have no money. And there's a small, little, tiny middle class. And so, we were lower middle class. We weren't considered poverty level, even though we really were. We were only over the poverty level by $2, right? So, that my parents' income actually was $2 over the poverty limit. So, we didn't have any money, and we didn't, but we didn't starve. So there you go. We weren't starving, but we didn't have any money for things, or for extra stuff, or extra to make life that much nicer, right? So I didn't expect much in that regards, because I grew up that way. So it didn't bother me so much, right? But it used to kind of bother me that I would see these people with these fine homes, and I talk about this in this book. I actually mention it because a few blocks away from us was a really rich neighborhood, and I'm talking these people would have been like the doctors and the lawyers and the corporation owners who actually were doing well for themselves, and they had these beautiful mansions, really like mansions. They weren't just nice homes. These were not homes that were just your average nice home with a nice yard. These were mansions with huge double doors and big old, columns, and we're talking ornate and elite. This would have been the top of the line stuff, right? And I just a few blocks away from us, we grew up in this, and we all knew that. I went to school with these kids. And so I knew the kind of privileged life that they had. And, of course, I wasn't thinking that probably 1 out of 3 of them would have been abused, because that's not what I was thinking about back in those days, right? Like 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys being abused. Child abuse happens in every type of home, not just people who are lower income or middle class or poverty levels. Child abuse happens in rich people's homes too, right? So, but I wasn't necessarily thinking about that at the time. And I don't know if I was jealous, but I was angry because these people, I thought, man, they must have such a good life. I used to envision these people's lives and the parents, treating their children nice and taking them out to shop and stuff. I actually talk about that later on in the book. But this was the contrast. This was the contrast in that city. And so you either had money or you didn't. You were either on the street hanging around doing drugs, or you were being well looked after as a teenager. It was a very small portion of middle-class people. And I knew some middle-class people that were, doing a little bit better than our family, and those people I used to consider were pretty well off compared to us, right? So, middle-class people to me were really well off. So that just tells you the difference. And so, I knew that those people, they didn't have the best of everything. They sure had a whole lot more than I did. And so I pictured, these kids being kind of pampered and being kind of spoiled. And I always felt a little bit, sort of gave me a bit of a roughness growing up the way that I did. As, growing up in that type of a neighborhood, in that type of home, I had a rough edge around me, and that was really meant for my own protection, right? And so my friend did as well. And so we'd be out running around in the middle of the night. We'd be thinking we would be fine. We'd be like, if anybody bothers us, we'll just beat them up, So we used to, my friend and I used to say stuff like that. And this particular chapter, when I opened the book, it's chapter 1. We actually were running from the police because my friend had flipped this police officer off, and we were just running to get away because he was chasing us in his car. And we went the next street up and jumped in a yard that was, the grass was pretty tall in that yard. They hadn't mowed the lawn, and we were face down, but we were wearing our freak jackets, which are military issued, military clothing, and green, and we had our faces painted black. And so we were pretty much not, we would have been hiding in the grass pretty good. I don't think that police officer could have seen us if he wanted to. And he drove by. We were just goofing off. Like, we weren't really trying to cause any problems, but we were just messing around on the street. And that's where the book starts off. And, just kind of going through and talking about some of the dysfunction and some of the stuff that my dad would do and things like that, and taking a look at that. So that was last week's Monday night show. So if you want to listen to that, that's the first 9 chapters that I read on Monday night. And so, this is sort of a progression of this summer. So it's sort of week to week, sort of talking about. It doesn't necessarily. It's not like a journal. I just sort of picked main parts of what had happened that summer, and this is all truth. So it's 100% reality. I didn't have to think of a story for this book. This is just one summer that I experienced with my friends, and I did it in a progression so that people could see that it was one summer, and this was what happened to us the whole summer. And it started out kind of messy, right? I mean, things were starting to happen, and just silly stuff, but it was all stuff that could have been avoided, and we really shouldn't have been out there doing, especially drugs, and just getting in trouble, like my friends doing some petty crime and things like this. And I never wanted to get in trouble with the law because I knew my parents would kill me. That was something that and I actually bring that up here later in the book, because my brothers had been in trouble with the law for years, and they were older than me, quite a bit older than me, and my parents were always, coming down on them for being in trouble, and my parents were abusing all of us, so it wasn't just me. And, I thought, man, if I get in trouble with the law, my mom will kill me because she doesn't even need an excuse. I just have to go in the house and have a look on my face, some type of look that she doesn't like, which was probably been a bit cocky. I had a bit of an attitude, and that's because I was being abused, right? So I didn't appreciate how I was being treated. So I wouldn't necessarily have a smile on my face. And my mother, I think because it would basically, the look on my face was condemning to her, because she knew, by the look on my face, that I was not happy about the way she was treating me. And so basically it was sort of almost like a condemning thing where she said, she probably thought to herself, I just think about this stuff all the time. She probably figured that really what I was doing, condemning her for the way she was treating me, so then she would beat me up, right? Because I had a look on my face. So that's the thing. I didn't have to be doing anything wrong to get beaten on or called names or having things thrown at me or being slammed into walls, which happened quite a bit. Just tossed up against the wall and told off and slapped around, and just being treated worse than you would treat a dog, you know what I mean? It's just horrible. And, I didn't have to be doing anything wrong to have that happen. So, I thought, man, I really don't want to get in trouble with the law because then my mother or my dad would kill me for sure, So it was always in the back of my mind to try to stay clear of the law. It doesn't mean I was actually on the right side of the law. I was just really good at being very careful to not get caught. And once in a while I'd get caught, but it's not a good scene. So I actually used to spend the night at my friend's house quite a bit, and especially when I didn't want to go home. And my mom didn't like this girl that I was hanging around with, and she had a big mouth, and my mom knew who this girl was. She lived 2 blocks away from us her whole life, so my mom knew her mother. And they weren't good friends or anything like that, but she knew who she was. And my mom didn't like this girl, and she was always telling me I shouldn't be hanging around with her. She was a slut and a whore and all this, right? And this girl was 14 years old, and she didn't even have a boyfriend. Right? She didn't even, she was totally not promiscuous at that point, and neither was I. And my mother used to call me a slut and a whore too. So it used to kind of bother me that my mother would call my friend these names because I really liked my friend, and she was a couple years younger than me, and I had just lost my best friend. My best friend had been killed by this car, by being hit by a car, and that year. And so I had just lost my best friend like 3-4 months before, and I knew who this other girl was that I started hanging around with. And here's my mom calling her a slut and a whore. And I really liked this girl. She was younger, but she was a good kid. And I thought, she's a little younger for me to be hanging out with. But I actually really liked her because she was spunky. She had some attitude, and I thought she was pretty cool because she didn't mind telling people her mind. She would just tell people exactly what she thought. And there was at one point earlier that my mom had was beating me up. And she actually saw it, and she told my mom, she said, there's laws against child abuse. And my mom threw her out of the house and made her leave. My mom's like, you get out of my house right now, and made her leave. So I got mad and I took off after her. And my friend was like, "You shouldn't let your mom treat you like that. You should stand up for yourself." And I was 2 years older than her, in 2 grade levels higher, right? So I mean, here's this girl, a lot younger than me, but willing to fight for her rights and stand up for what she believed in was right. And I thought that was really cool. I really thought that was great. So I actually took her advice and I started to stand up for myself. But it did. I guess it did kind of help, because my parents then started to see that what they were doing, it wasn't right. Did they change? No. But at least it gave me the peace of mind that I could say I didn't appreciate the way they were treating me. But it was all because of this girl, right? And so I really cared for the girl, and she was my good friend. And I didn't want my mom calling her names. And my mom would tell me not to hang out with her. But I used to actually go and spend the night over at her place and hang out with her all the time. We used to hang out every day. So chapter 9, this is where we left off. So I'll just start reading from here. And this show, it really is graphic. This is not for younger children. If you're a younger child, you want to have permission to listen to this show. So make sure that you have an adult there who can help you really make the decision on age appropriateness. This is not a show for young children. This is graphic, very graphic. All of my work is graphic. I'm dealing with child abuse, and child abuse is very graphic. And so I just don't believe in sugarcoating things and making them sound better for the sake of public advocacy. Because children that are dying and being tortured and abused and being killed and murdered, you can't sugarcoat that, right? It's just ridiculous that people would try. I mean, abuse is abuse, and it hurts, and it's incredibly damaging. But I think young children's ears, this is definitely not a show for young children, and also for people who are sensitive to the topics of abuse. So I would say, if you're having, some thoughts and thinking, well, I don't know, it might make me uncomfortable if I listen to this, or any of my shows. I say this on every show. You do the right thing for yourself and use your own discretion to whether or not you would like to listen and make the right choice for yourself, right? And young children, you have to have permission to listen to my show. So make sure you get an adult to listen and make sure it's something you should be listening to, because age appropriately, older teens and older, young, I just think for young children, it's just definitely not appropriate. So chapter 9. I woke up after a couple of hours and turned over to look at the clock. I came out into the living room wondering if my mom would say anything to me about not coming home. She did not need a reason to come down hard on me. I said hi to her as I walked to the bathroom. She did not acknowledge me or even look up as I went to have a shower. I was relieved. Heading outside, I could see Mitch and Ellen and Joe hanging out in front of Mitch's place. Ellen was telling them how someone had broken into their home and stolen a few things from her parents. She was asking them if they had seen anyone hanging around that looked suspicious. And Mitch and Joe just sat there cool and calm and looking at her as if they were surprised by the whole thing. I told her that I had not seen anything. We all hung out for the afternoon and ended up running around chasing each other and pretending we were mercenaries running through the neighbors' backyards, jumping fences, walking on walls, and finally ended up in my backyard. Mitch picked up a cane from a Spanish broom bush that was growing in our yard. That sucker was 4 feet long and solid. He was swinging it at me and hitting my knees with it. I was wearing shorts, and each time it hit my knees, I was swearing at him, "Give me that! Stop hitting me! Ouch!" And I was laughing, but it hurt like hell. He thought the whole thing was funny, and Joe and Ellen were laughing their heads off. I continued to try to grab it from him before he could hit me with it again, and I finally grabbed it out of his hands and started to chase him with it through the side yard. "You are in for it now," I was yelling at him, laughing and running, swinging a cane at him, when my dad appeared around the side of the house. He had just gotten off work and saw me chasing Mitch with the cane. My dad walked up to me forcefully, and I immediately started backing up. He yelled at me, "Stop right now," he said, as he grabbed the cane from my hands and with one shove knocked me to the ground up against the side of the house. "Oh, shit," I said as I could see him raise that cane up behind him and whip it down on my legs. "Ah!" I screamed out in pain. The pain was excruciating, and no sooner had he hit my legs, he brought the cane down again as hard as he could. I was jerking uncontrollably and could not even control the muscles in my face or lips as he hit my legs again and again. I was up against the house, shoulder was scraping against the rough stucco that was scratching my skin. Whack, 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 whack. The cane came down on my legs. My mouth was frozen. I could not let out a sound, as I could not breathe, and I felt as if my heart had stopped beating. When he felt he had done his job and inflicted enough pain, he took the cane and broke it over his knee. He threw it to the ground and walked off to go inside the house. I just laid there. I knew my friends had taken off. They were now across the street looking over at me, wondering if they should come and help me up or if they should just give me a minute and leave me alone. I laid there in shock and agony. I finally managed to sit up. Fuck, the word came out of my mouth. I was in so much pain and could not see due to the tears that were pouring out of my eyes. Sitting up, I slowly got up off the ground and was so humiliated. Here I was halfway to 16 years old, and my dad was still kicking my ass outside in plain view of the neighbors. Mitch and Ellen were used to seeing those episodes as they lived across the street from me my whole life. I did not want to go in the house as he was in the house, and my mom was not at home. She would not have helped me anyway, and would have probably added to it if she was home. I did not want my friends to see me crying, and I just stood there still shaking uncontrollably, wiping the tears away with the back of my hand. My legs were throbbing and stinging. Fuck him, I said, as I walked down the driveway to my friends. Your dad is a dick, Joe said. They all surrounded me and tried to comfort me in their own way. We all went to his backyard to smoke a joint. Chapter 10. As we sat there getting high, Ellen told us about a time that her dad had beaten her with his belt so hard that it made her sick to her stomach and she was throwing up all night. She was such a tiny girl. She had a very small frame. It was so skinny. It would not have taken much to do some real damage to her poor body. I felt sorry for her because her parents were very much like mine in their own world. Mitch was remembering how before his dad was murdered, that his dad was always hitting him. I vouched for that because I was there at his house on one of those occasions. Mitch and his younger brother were having a fight about something, and his dad came out into the front yard and stood over his son, punching him and pounding him, his little body being battered right in front of me. He had lost his temper yet again, and like my parents, had chosen to use his son for a punching bag. I understood it all too well and felt sorry for Mitch and his brother. Those beatings did not continue for long, because soon after his dad was murdered by those young punks who stabbed him to death those years before. Joe added that her mom had beaten her with her shoe one time for acting up and had slapped her and her sister before. Joe did not mention the abuse she and her sister took from her dad that afternoon. Joe would only tell me about those beatings and how her grandpa had sexually molested her when she was a small child. Not once, but many times when she would be at her grandparents' place. We kept that between her and me. We all agreed that it was just bullshit and not right for our parents to be treating us like this. I laid low for a few days, just hung around in the front yard and tried to stay out of trouble. It was definitely not looking like a good summer after all, just more of the same old crap I had been experiencing my whole life. Chapter 11. One afternoon we were all hanging out on the block. None of us had any money, and we all wanted to get stoned. Mitch's friend Stuart came over to hang out with us. Mitch and Stuart had an idea. They had come up with a plan, a way to make a few bucks. They suggested that we sign up to go door to door soliciting for a charity, and people would give us money. We would only turn in a few dollars and keep the rest. I did not like that idea and did not want to get in on it. Somewhere in my heart I knew this was wrong and we should not do it. But somewhere in my recent memories of the days that had just transpired, I knew that my dad whipping my legs with that cane was wrong, and he got away with it. I knew that my mom's abuse towards me, both physically and verbally and emotionally, was wrong, and these two monsters had gotten away with it my whole life. Society said nothing about their behavior. I knew that all the abuse and pain my parents caused each other and my siblings, and I was wrong, and yet everyone around that could have stepped in refused to get involved. They seemed to think it was okay, or just did not want to see it. So I went along with the idea. 2 days later, we were out and about knocking on doors, asking for change to help this charity. We had gone out in teams and had gone to other neighborhoods because we knew the people in our own area would have been wise to what we were up to. We counted up at the end and decided to turn in a small portion and keep the rest. We only made a few dollars each, but it was enough to get a dime bag of pot, and we all went to the park and rolled a doob and smoked it. I sat back and thought about how I had been stealing since I was about 7 years old. Did it make me feel good? No way, I thought. I did not want to fit the picture my parents painted of me, useless, worthless, no good, rotten whore. I did not want to be what they told me I was, from as far back as I could remember, a loser. I had been caught stealing on occasion and beaten badly for it. My mom whipped me with a belt after I had been caught with a candy bar that I did not pay for. She grabbed me, her nails clawed my arm. She had my head in a headlock and slammed me up against the living room wall. She then dragged me to the kitchen and slammed me to the floor. "You will be sorry," she screamed at me as she reached for the belt. "I'll make you pay for this. You will regret the day that you were ever born." Her voice thundered down on me. She made me pay for that candy bar. I was sorry, and I had been regretting the day I was ever born for as long as I could remember. I was 7 years old, and I had been paying since I was born. She had always maintained that she did not care what her children were out doing as long as they did not get caught. I made it my personal challenge to never get caught after that beating. It did not always work out that way. Chapter 12. Mitch and Stu went home, and Joe and I decided we were not going home. We wanted to stay out and have some more adventures. We used to talk about being mercenaries when we grew up, but we would only kill the bad guys. We thought it would be so cool to go on missions, and we used to practiced jumping fences, climbing 8-foot concrete walls, and we were getting pretty good at it. We decided to go and scope the neighborhood for some men-at-work signs. Joe wanted to march across the street with both of us holding the signs and stop traffic. We walked and talked as it grew later and darker, and we finally found a construction site with some signs. We picked up the biggest orange men-at-work sign we could carry, and walked back to my block with it. We would sit and wait for a car to come by, and as soon as they pulled up to the stop sign, we would both march in front of the car, each of us holding a side, and say left, 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 right, left, and laugh our heads off. We were just having fun. Most of the people in the cars were laughing too, although we did have a couple who were cranky and thought we should be at home that time of night. It was getting late, but neither of us wanted to go home. We sat and talked about boys, life, what we wanted to do when we grew up. Joe wanted to be in a band, and so did I. We would be an all-girls metal band, rockin'. I would be like Lita Ford, and Joe would be like Joan Jett, we decided. We sat there under the streetlight on the corner laughing and talking. We both agreed that each of us was so cool. I really liked Joe. She was only 13 and a half and quite a bit younger than me, but she could see me. I mean, really see me. She could see inside me and knew how much I was hurting and suffering inside. I think she stayed out late those nights just for me because she knew I did not want to go home. Wish you could live with us at my house, she said. Thanks, Joe. That is cool. I wish I could too, I said. Did your mom ever say anything about that duffel bag that you stashed for me, she asked. No, she hasn't yet, I said, hoping she never would. We both agreed it was a mystery. I wish I was pretty like you, she said. This comment took me off guard. I had never been told that in my lifetime and did not feel pretty. My hair was long and blonde. It was never cut or curled, and I always wore it down. I wore no makeup as I could not afford makeup, and my parents did not give me an allowance or buy any for me. My clothes consisted of a few pairs of jeans, a few shorts, and a few shirts handed down to me, and my most prized possession, my freak jacket. I thought it was funny that she would say this to me, but I realized that she had a very low self-esteem and was just growing up at that age. She was shorter than me, but she had gold hair and green eyes. She was very pretty, and I told her so. You are pretty, I said. Not really, she added. I'm too short. You will probably get taller, I said. Your mom is pretty tall. Maybe, she replied. When we grow up, we are going to be hot chicks, Joe said loudly, and I agreed with her. Chapter 13. The next few weeks rolled by. It was a hot summer, and we all had nowhere to go and nothing to do. None of my friends were involved in any summer programs for youth, and none of our parents cared what we were doing as long as they did not have to be bothered by us. One afternoon, John showed up on the street. Hey, how are you? We all asked him. It's all good, he said, walking up to us. I'm staying with my dad right now, and it's cool, he replied. We were glad to see him. Man, it's hot, Mitch said. Let's all go jump in Ellen's pool. Ellen's parents had a built-in pool in the backyard. It sounded like a great idea because the whole family was gone for the day. We all ran next door to their backyard. The pool cover is on, Mitch said. What a drag. It was locked into place with a lock, and John pulled a handful of M80 firecrackers out of his pocket. We should blow it up, he said. No, man, that is not cool, I said. I did not see the sense in that at all. It was their pool, and they had the right to cover it if they wanted to. Mitch and John agreed that they were going to blow it up. I told them all I was going home. I left the backyard and went across the street to my house. My mom had made brownies, and I grabbed one and took a bite and swallowed it. Boom! I heard a blast from across the street. They had blown the pool cover up. I was half laughing and half mad because that was just stupid in my eyes. I went to the front door to see them all laughing, and they were running over to Mitch's house next door to Ellen's. What was that? My mom asked from the kitchen. I don't know, I said. Within a few minutes, the police were on the street. Someone had reported it. They must have been seen by another neighbor. Soon after the police arrived on the street, an officer came knocking on our door. Can you come with me? The officer asked. Sure, I said, walking out the front door with him across the street. Did you see anything or hear anything like an explosion? He asked. I looked over to see two other policemen questioning my friends. We know about you guys. We call you the Veta Juvies, he said, looking at me. I heard a loud noise, but I was home eating a brownie, I said, looking at him and wondering if I was going to be involved in this if it went to court. We know who did it. The other officer came over to us. John's in handcuffs and being placed in the back of the police car. We found firecrackers on him. They walked away discussing the matter. I looked at John. He was laughing, and Mitch and Joe were looking at me, laughing. I did not think it was funny at all. The police left, and I went over to get the scoop. You were a chicken shit for taking off like that, Mitch said. I told him I did not think it was cool to blow up the pool cover, and Mitch added that he had tried to talk John out of it, but John just lit the thing and threw it in the middle of the pool cover. You should have seen it, Mitch laughed. It was blasted to bits. John will be back in juvie for sure, juvenile hall, I added. We won't be seeing him for a while, that's for sure, Joe added. She'd spent some time in juvenile hall 2 years before. I thought about John and all the trouble he was always getting himself into. He did not have to look for trouble. It followed him around. Chapter 14. I went home after hanging out with Mitch and Joe for the rest of the day, and my mom was standing in my bedroom doorway waiting for me. What was all that about? She asked me sternly, her arms folded across her chest. Did you have anything to do with that? She added. No, I was here eating a brownie, I said in a low voice. I swear to God that if you had anything to do with that, I will kill you, she yelled at me, her eyes glazed over with hatred and anger. I knew I was in for it. I knew that look. My face fell immediately. I stood there waiting for it. Take that look off your face right now, she shouted. What? I pleaded with her. What look? I asked as my voice turned squeaky, and I started to brace myself for what was coming. You know very well what I'm talking about, you rotten ingrate, she said, coming for me. I can't even ask you a simple question without you defying me. I didn't do anything, I said to her as she grabbed my arm and twisted it, slapping me hard across the face with her free hand. I was half bent over as she pulled my arm and twisted it down. A backhand brought me to my knees, and a kick to my legs followed. I was trying to ward off the blows, but was not able to, and a knee to my face sent me to the ground. My hands went immediately to my face as I looked for blood, and as I laid there, she continued to punch my back and kick my side as hard as she could. God damn you to hell, you no good rotten piece of shit. Punch, kick, I knew this routine. I had it all memorized perfectly. I was curled up as best as I could be under the circumstances. A kick to my side made me scream out loud, which I am sure made her quite happy. I don't know why I didn't let you rot in your diapers. Kick, I should have killed you years ago, she screamed as she pounded my back. I was in pain and hoped this would not last much longer. At least there would be minimal damage to my face this time, I thought to myself. Don't let me see a cop at this door again. You hear me? She shouted as she straightened her dress and collected herself, walking back to the kitchen, leaving me in a heap on the living room floor. I slowly got up off the floor and went to my room. My mom was phoning my oldest sister to complain about me and how bad I was and how much trouble I was causing her. I closed my bedroom door, went to my dresser, looked in the mirror. I wiped my nose, looking at the fresh wound on my face. I was angry. I was hurt. I was in pain. And what really pissed me off was that I was so used to this. This was my life as far back as I could remember. I could hear my mom telling my sister that I was causing her to lose her mind and causing her so much grief, and how sick and tired she was of my attitude, and that she was going to have to do something if she could not stand me or my behavior. I wanted to scream. I wanted to trash my room. I wanted to run away. I wanted to die for so long. I am not a bad kid, I thought. If I was bad, it was because of the way her and my dad had been treating me from the beginning. I should just leave, just run away, I thought, as I had thought so many times after my parents beat or cursed me. On the street, looking for a place to stay is not the answer, I thought, knowing the dangers that were out there. Stay here and take more of this their garbage? Can I do it? I asked myself. I stayed in my room that night, not daring to go out into the living room or the kitchen. I lied down on my bed to rest my aching body. My back and my side were killing me. I tried to relax and breathe, but my head was pounding. I kept half an ear open, listening for my bedroom door to burst open. I fully expected my mom or dad to come charging in my room and continue kicking my ass again, as they had done in the past. Stupid bastards, I thought of how much I hated the way they had treated me and each other. I eventually fell asleep from exhaustion, not caring if they came in my room or not. Chapter 15. The next morning, I woke up stiff, very sore and angry. I had slept in my clothes, so I changed my jeans and t-shirt, put my shoes on, brushed my hair, and headed outside. I sat on the porch steps, just trying to wake up. Birds were chirping, and the sounds of summer were in the air. Lawnmowers cutting grass somewhere in the neighborhood. The odd car drove by. I looked across the street to see if my friends were around anywhere. Not seeing any of them on the street, I decided to take a long walk. I used to do that a lot, walk across the city or run across the city, depending on my moods. I walked casually down the streets, block after block, thinking about the last month and all that had been going on. Summer was nearly half over. It was the middle of July, and the sun beat down in the sky. I stopped under a shady tree in the upper-class neighborhood I had walked to. The houses were so much nicer than mine. These were multi-level homes with landscaped lawns, rock gardens, and fountains. I had walked over to that neighborhood many times. Lots of the kids I went to elementary school, junior high school, and high school lived in this neighborhood. I looked at the 2- and 3-story homes with the double front doors, huge ornate door knockers and handles, and picture-perfect lawns with bird baths and statues. I pictured the families that lived in them, how nice their lives must be. the girls would have rooms full of beautiful furniture, mirrors, clothes, and all the things that girls should have, fluffy pillows on the bed, and a dresser full of perfume, jewelry, cassette tapes, books, some makeup, and fancy brushes. I looked up at the windows on the top floors and tried to picture what it would be like to be one of those girls. Mom would take her out to buy a new outfit, and Dad would ask her if she needed anything. They would talk and have fun together and go places together. They would take family vacations, and the parents would hold each other and hug each other, and they would go to the movies and help their kids with their homework. They would save for their education and send them to college or university. I snapped back to reality. Fuck it, I thought, as I started to walk down the road heading back home. Chapter 16. I walked straight past my street and up 2 more blocks to see if Jo was home. Knocking on her door, her sister called her, yelling, "Jo, Steph is here." Jo came out onto her porch and, taking one look at my face, became angry. "What happened? Did your mom and dad kick your ass last night?" she asked. "Yes, my mom was pissed because she thought I was in on blowing up Ellen's pool cover," I added. "Let me finish and we'll split," she said, opening the door and inviting me in. I went and sat on the couch while she finished the list of cleaning chores her mom had asked her to do. When she had finished her portion, we were off to the park, the next street over. "Man, you should run away," Jo said after I explained what happened and how my mom had beaten me the night before. "Where would I go? I've already spent a night out in the alley because I was too afraid to go home," I added. "You can stay at my house," Jo said as we walked back down to my street. As we came around the corner, we saw the commotion going on across the street from my house. Ellen's parents and Mitch's mom were arguing in their front yards. Ellen's parents were demanding that Mitch's mom pay for the damage, and Mitch's mom told them that she was not going to pay for something her son did not do. And they were insisting because he was with John when the pool cover was blown up. Mitch's mom was so mad. Her face beat red. Beer in hand, she stomped back into her house, slamming the door behind her. Even with the door shut, we could hear her screaming at Mitch. Ellen's parents would not let her come out to hang out with us. She was not allowed to speak to us or have anything to do with us. I think her parents suspected that all of us or some of us were responsible for breaking into their home. It was getting way out of hand. I was almost glad that summer was almost over. Jo and I hung out for a while, and I decided to go home that night. As soon as I got in and went to my room, I could hear my parents fighting. I hated when they were fighting. It made my nerves bad, put me on edge, and I should have been used to it by now, as our house had a regular fight night session. I was usually the one to break up their fights and try to protect my mom from my dad, but after the way she had been treating me and the beating I had took from her, I did not care anymore. I stayed in my room trying to tune them out. They were both screaming at each other, and this would normally be followed by someone getting hurt. Whether it was my mom or my dad, someone would get hurt. I heard my dad shove my mom into the living room wall and thought to myself, this is going to get ugly if I don't go out there and try to get them apart. I could hear my dad slap my mom and my mom trying to fight him off. It all had to do with the fact that my mom had stopped sleeping with my dad before I was born. She had been refusing to have sex with him for over 16 years, and he had been continually forcing her to, raping her if she would not give in to his demands. Nighttime was hell in my house, as I had been listening to them fighting in the middle of the night for as long as I could remember. I opened my bedroom door to see what was happening, just in time to catch my mom smashing my dad over the head with a heavy table lamp. It was ceramic and busted and shattered as she brought it down on his head. My dad was stunned. I was waiting to see what would happen next, and figured he should be out cold after a blow like that. This was not the case, as my dad kept coming for my mom. I went out into the living room screaming at them to stop their fighting, and as I approached my dad, he turned at me, blood dripping down his forehead, grabbed me by my shoulders, and shoved me back into the wall. I slid down the wall and was out of it for a few seconds. That was not the first time I had been nearly knocked out by him. I just sat there not sure if I should get up and attempt to step in or just stay where I was and try not to get hurt anymore myself. "I swear to God, if you touch me again, I will kill you in your sleep," my mom screamed at my dad. He backed off and went to his room. My mom went to the kitchen and slammed the kitchen door behind her. I went to my room and wondered why my parents stayed together. They certainly did not love each other and worked so hard to destroy each other. It's all they knew. Chapter 17. The next couple of weeks were uneventful. Jo and I hung around and tormented these two girls who lived on the corner. Lisa and Karen lived with their parents on the corner about 3 houses over from me, and Jo loved to pull pranks on people, and she would go around collecting dog poop in paper bags and set them on fire on people's porches. We did not hang out with these girls and did not know them that well. They had only been on my block for a short time. We had no idea where they were from or anything about them because they were never outside. Jo would terrorize them every time she saw them, and I was their backup. After lighting the bag of dog poop on fire on their porch, Joe would ring the doorbell and run, and we would be hiding far enough away that they could not see us, and we would watch their dad stomp on the bag, which in turn got dog poop all over their dad's shoes. This is the type of thing that Joe liked doing, childish pranks. We thought we were so tough, Joe and I. We would go around and tell people we were going to kick so-and-so's butt, and of course it would get spread around the neighborhood real quick. We would go and take bags of leaves and grass clippings and tear them open and redistribute it back onto the neighbors' lawns. We were just bored, and neither of us had any money. We would go to the mall and hang out once in a while. We stopped in to look at some jewelry, and Joe wanted to try on some rings. I tried one on too, and it got stuck on my finger, so I just put my hand in my pocket, and we left the store. As soon as I showed Joe the ring, she asked me to go back to the store and get one for her too. We went back to the store, and I asked to see the rings again, tried the one on that Joe wanted, and again put my hand in my pocket, and we left. Had I been caught, I would have been so busted. I don't know why I did those things, because I knew it was not right to steal. If we were not hanging out with Mitch and Stuart getting stoned, then we were just running around the neighborhood looking for something to do. We did not have any other interests or real boyfriends, so we just hung around looking for ways to piss off the neighbors. Chapter 18. Summer was almost over, and Joe and I came back, walking back to my street from the park. We were walking back to my house when we noticed a sniper in uniform on top of my next-door neighbor's house. We stopped just a few houses from mine, looking, wondering what was happening. We noticed that the police cars up the road, and there were policemen and a SWAT team in position, and it seemed to be on the corner by Lisa and Karen's house. We ducked down behind some shrubs, and within a few minutes, Lisa's dad came out of the house with a gun. He was screaming and hollering and waving the gun around. 3 shots rang out as he fired the gun at his car's gas tank, missing each time. Joe and I wondered what had happened and why he would go so crazy. Where were Lisa and Karen and their mom? No shots were fired at their dad, but the police managed to talk him into putting the gun down. They cuffed him and put him in the back of the police car and took him in. We hung out with Mitch and Stuart talking about how crazy our block was. Yeah, and what do you think about that new family that moved into that house, Joe said, pointing to a few houses down from mine. They're a little strange, I said. I saw them all eating dinner in the living room in the nude, Mitch added, laughing. What? I said. The mom and dad and the kids were all nude? I asked. Yes, I was just messing around one night and I thought I would spy on them. And I peeked into their living room window and saw them all at the dining table eating dinner in the nude. Mitch added, What a trip. That is crazy, Joe said. We all talked about making it a new tradition to spy on them from then on. The 3 kids that lived there were hardly ever outside, and they had only lived on our street for a month. We decided we would talk to them the next time they were outside and find out more about them. I went home that night, and as I walked up to the driveway to go inside, I was hoping my parents would not be fighting again. I had enough drama for one day. Is everyone crazy? I thought to myself as I turned my stereo on and turned out the light. Chapter 19. The next day, Joe came over, and we went over to talk with those new kids on the block. You ring the doorbell, Joe said. No, man, I don't want to ring the doorbell, I added. We were standing on their porch, and one of the kids saw us and opened the door. What do you want? The girl asked. She was younger than Joe, and she stood in the doorway as we asked her where her brother and sister were and their names. Do you want to hang out with us? Joe asked. No, I can't, she said. We're not allowed to play with you, she added. I was peering inside the door to see if I could spot any naked family members hanging out in the living room. Oh, that sucks, I said, looking at Joe. I thought that was weird unless the parents had heard about us, the Veta Juvies. Joe and I spent the rest of the day hanging out with Mitch and his friends, Doug and Mike. They had Mike's mom's car and wanted to go cruising. We headed out to the heights looking for the parties in the foothills of the mountains. Lots of kids partied out there in the brush, and we were looking for some pot and some fun. We cruised through the off-road area. Large ruts prevented Mike's mom's car from going further. We would have to back up and cruise the other direction. A truck full of young guys shouted at us to move that piece of junk as Mike was trying to steer the car and avoid becoming trapped in the ruts. Doug and Mitch started to shout back at the guys in the other truck. You faggots, Mike yelled out his window, making the 3 guys in the truck more angry. They are just looking for trouble, I said nervously as I could see that this was getting out of hand. Fuck those bastards, Doug said as he pulled the shotgun to the window that was lying behind our heads in the back seat. Oh, shit, I said, laughing nervously. Don't do anything stupid, I shouted loudly. Those guys are going to get a taste of what we got right here, Doug said as he leaned out the window and pointed the shotgun at the truck. Mike was now driving as fast as he could to get the car to go, and the car was bouncing over the ruts and down embankments and through the bushes and cactus. He was flooring it, and the car was definitely taking a beating as it bottomed out a couple times. We hit some sand and spun our wheels, all the while the truck was gaining on us. They definitely had the upper hand. Mike finally turned the wheel, backed up, and then floored it in another direction, and the truck didn't have time to slow down and went off a low embankment. Awesome, Mitch said. Do you think we lost them? Joe added. We were all freaking out and looking out the windows. It was dark, and we could not see them anywhere. We split the scene, not knowing what happened to that truck. I was thinking to myself what a close call that was. Too close for comfort. Chapter 20. The last weeks of summer were at a close. I had managed to convince my parents that I needed to learn how to drive, and my dad agreed and was teaching me how to drive when he got home from work. It would not be long until I have my driver's license, and then all we need is a car, I thought as I was walking to the bus stop. It was the start of a new school year. Joe and I would meet at the bus stop in the morning and smoke a doob. We did not care if anyone knew we were getting high. We were the Veta Juvies, and all the kids either liked us or steered clear of us. We had a few enemies, but we did not care. We were tough, and we both figured we could take them on. I knew Joe could. She was notorious for beating other kids up. I was not into fighting. I had seen enough fights between my parents to turn me off of violence and taken enough beatings from them to last me a lifetime. I was not beyond sticking up for my friends if I had to or protecting myself. I was used to trying to protect my mom from my dad. I was not a wimp. Joe and I did not have any classes together because she was in the 10th grade and I was in the 12th. Senior year in high school was going to be tough. The courses were harder and more homework was involved. I was glad to see some of my old friends from school who I had not seen all year. I was glad to get off the block for a while and away from my house for a while. Most kids I knew hated school and ditched most of it. Joe and I would meet up for lunch and go get high off school grounds. Joe would rarely return to class, but I would not ditch with her. I did not want my parents coming down on me for any reason, so I went to class. A few weeks into the school year, I got a part-time job and started saving for a car. I was not even 16 years old yet, but they agreed to hire me on the grounds that I would behave myself professionally while I was at the office and not cause trouble. Joe was playing out because it meant less time to hang around, but within a few short months I had saved enough to get a car. It also meant that for the first time in my life, I had money to spend on whatever I wanted. Joe and I immediately began to buy large quantities of pot, and all we did from then on was get stoned. that's it for tonight. But it's just one story, like it's one story of teens who, without the proper parental supervision and the proper care, that parents would provide parents should provide for their teens and for their kids from day one, from day zero. I mean, when a child is born, they're born they're born of these people who should be looking after them and doing everything they can to make the best decisions for their children. And, that encourages, of course, the children to make the best decisions for themselves later on in life. And I don't talk about, too much of the issues of my siblings and whatnot in this book, because that's all covered in A Life of Death or Redemption. This book is mainly just about me and my friends and what we were experiencing in our lives and in our home, in our daily life for this one summer. But, in the meantime, we all had stuff going on. I had, my siblings were moved out. So I was the last child in the home. And my other sister had just gotten married and moved out, and who she was closest in age to me. She was 5 years older. So she had gotten married and moved out, and that left me in the home on my own to deal with these two abusive, dysfunctional, mentally ill, domestic violence abuse parents who had no intentions on straightening up their behavior or trying to treat me decently, you know what I mean? And so this just kept going on and on and on. And people think about, when I was 16 or 15, 16 years old, I thought I'd been on the planet a long time. Because for a child, that is a long time. As an adult, you can look back at the last 15 years and think, wow, that's gone fast. But as a child, that's your world. That's your whole entire life, is this unit, this existence in this family, whatever family you're in. And mine was negative and bad from day one. You know what I mean? I came into this situation and I was just continuing on in it, and so it just shows the dysfunction and what happens, and the fact that many children and many youth and teens will not make the right decisions for themselves if they have not been given the skills to do it. And so it's such a huge issue. And I think that, parents, you owe it to your children. If you're listening to this, you owe it to your children. If you are going to have children or you're already a parent, you do the right thing by your children. You owe them that. They are counting on it. They need it. They need every bit of help that they can get. And because being a teenager is tough, even on the teens that have a great home, it's still hard on them with the issues that teens face. And so, but when a teen is not receiving any support in the home, you can really see how incredibly serious and how fast their lives can go downhill, and that while as they're making these choices for themselves that are not necessarily healthy and not the best choices for themselves. So that's what the rest of the book is about. But I just want to thank everybody who's listened and tuned in to my story, and you know, I appreciate your support. I know a lot of people are supporting me through my healing journey, and a lot of people have, you know, said some really kind comments about my books, and I do appreciate it. And I want to thank Sandra Potter and Donna Shear for allowing my voice to be heard, and you know, getting my books out there. And the proceeds, all the profits from both of my books, A Life of Death, The Redemption, and Veta Juvies, are going directly to dream catchers for abused children. And so, because I want the money to go to stop child abuse, I did not want the money to pay my rent. You know what I mean? This is all about stopping child abuse and helping to promote healthy parent-child relationships, right? So, you know, do what you can within your own areas. You know, become a voice for these children out here, right? We need everyone's voice in on this, and everyone can do that. You know what I mean? And remember to look out for the kids in your own life, to make sure that they're not being abused, and that, you know, you're doing the best thing by them. And if you know a child's being abused, do the right thing and make the phone call, or get that child some help. You know, do not allow that child to continue to be abused, right? It's absolutely horrific. You know, the aftermath, right? If they do survive and they're not killed by the abuse, the aftermath of trying to live and cope later on is incredibly damaging. It's incredibly hard, and many people do not survive it. 2 of my brothers didn't. And, you know, it's just horrific. So make sure that you do look out for children around you, right? Make sure that they're not being abused. And for teens out there, I would say make sure you reach out and get some help. You know somebody who's being abused, yourself you're being abused, or let's say, you know, you've got a lot of trouble in your life and a lot of problems. There's teen hotlines out there you can call anonymously. There's all kinds of people that really do care. If you run into somebody that doesn't care, just don't bother with them and move on to somebody who does. You know what I mean? Because there are some good people out there. I've run into a really lot of good people. And so I know this for a fact. There are good people, but you do have to kind of look, and if you run into somebody who is not helping, find somebody that will. Do the right thing by yourself and get yourself some help, and get your friends some help, and do what you can to have a good life, and to learn how to cope and make some good decisions for yourself, and you know, and not destroy your life based on what your parents did to you, or what happened to you from your past. You know, whoever the abuser was, or whoever was not there for you. You know, we ultimately have to make those decisions for ourselves, because we can't go back and change the past. But we can change today, and we can change the future by changing the way we feel about ourselves, and the fact that we do count, we do matter, and we do deserve to get help. So whatever way it is, self-help or whatever you decide to do, but make sure that you do reach out. You know, you call a crisis line if you have to, right? That's what I always say on all my shows. So thanks, everybody, for being here. Have a great night, you know, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to all my shows. And I'll be back on tomorrow morning, One Child to Be Survivor to Another, same time, same place, 6 o'clock a.m. So have a great night. Talk to you soon.